Good afternoon and welcome to Ray of Life Radio on WGFS 1430 AM in Covington, Georgia. That was Krista Rooks, Most High Renowned, from her album At His Feet. We're going to have a bunch of music today. I'm flying solo in the studio, so we're going to be talking a little bit about grief as it appears to those around other people that are going through grief. I think you'll find some helpful and interesting information as we go through today, but I would love for you to join in the conversation, and you can call in at 678-212-0310, or you can reach us on Facebook, facebook.com/Ray of Life Radio, Twitter at Ray of Life Radio, or you can even email us at rayofliferadio@gmail.com. I want to shout out first thing, we have a Friday morning Bible study every Friday morning at the Square Perk. Just want to say hello to all the guys from our Brofast. It's a men's Bible study. We break into the different books of the Bible and have a nice in-depth study, along with some breakfast and coffee every Friday morning. So I hope they're all having a great day after today's study. But anyway, today we're going to break down, we're going to start talking about grief and how it looks to those around us. You know, every time we're going through grief, we've kind of put ourselves in a position where we really need to have some sort of a support system around us. It's vitally important that we do that. However, sometimes our support systems try to force things on us. They try to force us into a self-help book, or they try to push us to do things before we're ready. And a lot of times that may be thought of as helpful, but in reality it's not. We've got to make sure that any support we offer those that are going through grief, it's there for them in any way they need them. If they need to just talk, as a support person, you need to just be ready to listen. If they need a shoulder to cry on, you need to just simply be that shoulder. And one thing that's vitally important, when you say, how are you doing, as a support person, you need to be ready for them to tell you the nitty-gritty of how they're doing. And sometimes that's not pretty, because grief is not pretty. So we've got to understand that someone's loss has earned them the freedom to pass through grief in their own way, on their own terms, and in their own time. So it's very important we remember that. As we go through today, I'm going to be playing some contemporary Christian music. We're going to be talking a little bit more about this and how grief looks to those that are around us. And we're going to just be celebrating a Friday from noon to 1, celebrating Christ, and He's the reason that we do what we do. And we are so thankful that He has put us on this earth, and we thank Him for that. Our next song is Ain't No Grave by Bo Bice from his album New Soul Revival. Bo is local here. He was from American Idol. He's done great. He's now the lead singer for, it always slips my mind, but I'll look it up and I'll tell you when we come back. But here's Bo Bice, Ain't No Grave, from his album New Soul Revival.
When I hear that trumpet sound,
was mistaken as to who he is now the lead singer for. It's Blood, Sweat, and Tears. For some reason, I always try to think of other bands when that happens. One thing I do want to say is people that watch us on YouTube, you will hear music that is different from what I'm announcing on the radio. The reason is for copyright reasons. So you may hear other songs by Scott England or Krista Rooks, and that's because I have permission to play their music on YouTube. But the other music, we're going live over the air with what I'm actually announcing. So Ray of Life Radio, we're back talking about what grief looks like to those around us. And one thing that I really don't understand is what our minds begin to do as we start trying to help people through their grief. A lot of times our mind tend to go towards offering advice. We may have no clue what the situation the other person is in, but we think that we know best how to tell them to get through their grief. And it's important for us to understand that a lot of times our advice is useless for other people. Sometimes it will be beneficial, but in most instances, the way we go through grief and the way they're going through grief are two different animals. And we must be respectful of the fact that, again, they have earned the freedom to go through grief in their own way, on their own terms, and in their own time. And that's very important for us to remember as those on the outside looking in. Sometimes we try to offer advice and we try to comfort people with cliches and old wives' tales. As Christians, one of the biggest ones that I hear on an almost weekly basis is they're in a better place. And, we all know as Christians that they are in a better place. However, as a griever, you're still feeling that pain of their absence. You're still feeling that pain of wanting them there with you physically. And although they are in a better place, the griever may just not be in the best place to hear that at that time. So sometimes instead of offering up something simple like that, which I know is offered with the best intent in the world, it's sometimes best just to say, look, I'm here for you. I'm ready to listen when you're ready to talk, and just be there for them. That's what we all have to remember. When we're on the outside looking in at someone else going through grief, it's always important to remember that it is their way of going through grief and not ours. One of the other things that we hear is, God added another flower to his rose garden, and, other things along that line. You've got to remember when people are going through grief, if something sounds cliche to you, it's going to sound 50 times more cliche to them. So just make sure that you're there for them. You tell them that you're there for them. You're willing to listen when they're ready to talk. But sometimes offering up those simple cliches don't necessarily help. Again, this is Ray of Life Radio. Our call-in number is 678-212-0310. We are here from noon to 1 today, and we're talking about life, death, grief, and bereavement. And we're talking about what grief looks like to those that are on the outside. We're going to a song now. We're going to play Sanctuary by Scott England from his album, Redeemed and Brave.
You are mighty, wonderful, blessed, Lord, give all your praise, give all your
Welcome back to Ray of Life Radio. That was Scott England from his album Redeemed and Brave with his song Sanctuary. As we've said before, Scott is one of the worship leaders at East Ridge Community Church off Highway 142 going east here in Covington. Talking about Scott, I just want to speak some praise about something that I was a part of last weekend that was really phenomenal to see in this county. We had over 11 churches come together, and the youth groups from those 11 churches pulled about 200 plus kids. I think it was close to 250 youth, middle school and high schoolers, in one place for 2 days to worship, to simply talk about discipleship, things that they face as youth that are Christians in today's church, in today's schools, and in today's community. And it was just a phenomenal time. And Scott England, Krista Rooks, and Crystal Padilla, local musician and worship leader as well, offered up some great music and worship for those kids. But to see 250 kids in an auditorium worshiping Jesus made a phenomenal sight. And I just want to give some praise out to those hardworking youth leaders that have decided to lay down the divisions between churches and say, we need to be one church. We need to be the church that is of Christ, and we need to pull together and we need to act like we are all Christians. And that is fantastic to see happening in our community. Well, we're going to get back to the discussion about grief and what grief looks like to those around us. When I do a grief meeting, a lot of times I'll pull out a little child's toy that's called a Hoberman sphere. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that, but it looks like a jagged little ball that has all these points coming out of it with a little hollow space in the middle. But if you pull some of the jagged spots, it opens up into a huge ball. And what this ball does, this child's toy, it gives me the ability to make that an analogy of grief. When this toy is closed, you've got a very small center that is inside that's hollow, and you've got no room. You've got absolutely no room. And this is like grief at the beginning, when it's raw, when it's really just the most challenging to get started in our grief work. We can't move without hitting an emotion of some sort, and there are many emotions dealing with grief. But over time, as we heal, as we go through and process through what we're facing with grief, that hollow space in the middle begins to expand, kind of like pulling that ball apart. It begins to expand, and that gives us more room to move through life without hitting an emotion. Some days that ball will be wide open and we've got a lot of room to move with very little emotion about the death of our loved one hitting us in the head. But then some days that ball closes back down and we have really tough times. And what we have to remember is that a roller coaster of emotions accompanies all of grief. One day you'll have a real positive day, one day you'll have a real negative day, and every other day is somewhere in between. The thing you've got to remember, though, is that grief is a process. Grief takes work, and there are times when grief is extremely messy, and there are times when grief is not as hard. But we have to respect each person that's going through grief because they are experiencing the physical loss of someone that was very close to them. And they're trying to process that physical loss and remove that person to a position of spiritual and emotional presence rather than a physical presence in their lives. And that takes a lot of work and that takes a lot of effort. And experiencing emotion, hitting those numerous emotions of sadness, of anger, of guilt, hitting all of those is normal to the process. That's healthy grief. And it's okay for them to have those periods where they're going through trouble. As an outsider looking in, we have to remember that. We have to be willing to simply offer up a hug if they're having a bad day. Or we have to be willing to sit there and say, hey, you need to talk today? And just let them open up or just let out what they're feeling, because they're going to do better by telling what they're feeling. They're going to do better by expressing those emotions. It's time for them to begin trying to work towards their new normal. Now, a lot of people have begun using the term new normal to refer to everything, but grief, we like to say that the normal you knew the day your loved one died will not be the normal you achieve after you've healed from their grief. You're going to reach this new normal where their death is very present in your life, very real experience in your life, but you're going to move forward into continuing to live your life. And that is quite a tough position to get to. There will still be times where you will be, as we've called before, drive-through moments, sitting in the drive-through at your favorite fast food restaurant, and suddenly a smell or a sight or a sound or something will trigger the experience of emotion that just causes you to break out in one of those tearful moments. But even if you're out in public, let it go. Let the tears flow. Tears, crying is helpful for your body. It releases chemicals. It allows you to relieve some of the stress that you're going through, and it's vitally important that you do that. So when you have one of those drive-through moments, don't worry about the person sitting next to you looking at you like you're crazy. You just have to worry about the fact that you're going through grief and you need to experience this emotion at this time. If you have any questions today about what we're talking about, you can call in at 678-212-0310 at WGFS 1430 AM in Covington, Georgia, or you can reach us through Facebook, facebook.com/Ray of Life Radio, or through Twitter at Ray of Life Radio, or by email, rayofliferadio@gmail.com. We're going to go back to some music. We're going to play You Make Me Brave by Bethel Music from Live at the Civic.
There's no in the sun. You are in secret. You're there. I am restored. When you
Welcome back to Ray of Life Radio here Friday. Fantastic day outside. The weather is gorgeous. God has gifted us with another beautiful day. You can call in to join in the conversation today as we talk about life, death, grief, and bereavement. 678-212-0310, 1430 WGFS AM, or you can reach us through Facebook, Twitter, or even by email. We're going out live over YouTube as well, so I'm glad to have everyone with us today. We're going to continue our talk about grief and what it looks like to those on the outside, and we're going to look at what grief looks like to us as a friend of a griever. A lot of times some misunderstandings take place during a period of grief. As the griever, we go through different things that cause us to maybe appear standoffish. And as a friend, you've got to remember that they may look as if they don't want anything to do with anybody. They may ignore your phone calls, they may avoid you in church or in the store, but you've got to understand that they may just need some space. They may just need some time to be able to process what they're going through. If that's the case, the only thing you can really do is simply allow them to know that you're there for them. Allow them to know that when they are ready to talk, that you will be there with open ears and with an open heart to be able to guide them through this. In many instances, the griever acts this way out of a misguided perception that they're going to be bothering you if they talk about the grief of their loved one. By letting them know that you're there for them, you can kind of put that off at the beginning and let them know immediately that that's not the case, that you are willing to listen. Of course, you may find that your friend wants to do nothing but talk about their loss. If this is the case, you still need to be there and be willing to listen as much as possible. The griever is going through an emotionally vulnerable state, and any step back from them can be taken as an abandonment move. And they're going to amplify anything that you do in that aspect. So you need to really try to be there as much as possible. You don't want to layer anything on top of their already full plate with the emotions that they're going through. You may also want to encourage them to join some sort of support group like we have on Thursdays. I don't know how many of you know, but we do grief facilitation every Thursday, except for the fifth Thursday at 6 p.m. at Caldwell & Cowan Funeral Home on Floyd Street. Caldwell & Cowan is one of our sponsors, and it is great to have them sponsoring us to be able to make this information available to the public at large, and we are very grateful for that. But they allow us to do grief facilitation as well. We have groups that meet every Thursday except for the fifth Thursday, and that's a safe place where people can come in and talk all they want. or they can simply sit back and listen. But it's a good way for people to realize, grievers to realize, that they're not going crazy, that there are other people suffering through the same things they are, and that there are other people having trouble taking those next steps. Now, we may also work with someone who has begun going through grief. So what will grief look like to us as a coworker or an employer? Well, it may seem like the person is not there. They may be disorganized. They may make mistakes that are highly uncharacteristic to their normal work ethic. They may be running late. They may be appear disheveled or unkempt. In instances such as this, understanding and patience is vitally important. If they did not take time off when the death occurred, allow them to do so. I know many jobs nowadays allow some bereavement leave. I think it's only 3 days, but some people choose not to take that, and that may be something they need to allow themselves to properly process through their loss. The big thing is you need to reassure them that their grief or their absence because of their grief will not cause them to lose their job. You've got to understand they're going through a lot already, and the fear of possibly losing their job could actually push them a little further into sadness or depression. So we've got to make sure that we're there for them, we support them in any way possible, and also if we can connect them to a group or an individual that may have experienced the same type of thing, then that may also be helpful. It is also possible that a bereaved coworker or employee will begin working all the time. We see people that pour themselves into their work, they pour themselves into their hobbies, and they do this in an attempt to completely try to avoid their grief. They work, work, work. The thing is, you can never work enough to bypass your grief. Grief is still there no matter how much you work. You've got to allow yourself the time to grieve. If you just work, 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 you're going to continually push yourself till you make yourself physically ill. Plus, not dealing with your grief can complicate that illness, and you can really suffer a lot of debilitating things that go along with this overwork and unprocessed grief. It's vitally important that if we see people around us that are going through this work, work, work all the time, that we do promote some way to allow them to take time for their grief. Some people they live and die by their schedule, and it may even take going to the extreme of scheduling them an hour a day to where they can actually experience their grief. I know that sounds silly, but it has been done, and it can work for someone who is intensely organized in that way. The thing is, again, you can never work enough to avoid your grief. Your grief is going to catch you. It's going to constantly be there waiting for you to take that quiet moment. And the longer you delay the inevitable, the worse it can be on you physically, mentally, through your behavior. It's just important that you remember that as well. It's also important to note that people who try to avoid grief, they kind of become an emotional time bomb, so to speak, where they're a pressure cooker with a faulty valve. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those blow up, but that's kind of the way it is if we don't allow ourselves to vent some of the emotion we feel from our grief. We eventually get to the point where we have no option but to just rupture. And when we do that, we can lash out at people we love, we can become physically ill, or we can have other side effects that may not be something that we planned on as we went through our grief. Again, you're listening to Ray of Life Radio. I hope the information we're giving out today is helpful as you look in on people who may be around you that are grieving. It's important to remember that you're always there for them if you feel so inclined. You can call in and join our conversation, 678-212-0310. Reach us on Facebook, Twitter, or even by email. We're going to go to our next song. I'm going to shake things up a little bit. I'm going to play a little different genre of Christian music, but just listen for the doctrine, listen for the story behind it. This song is by KB. It's from his album Tomorrow We Live, and what he's done is he's taken the song Oceans by Hillsong and kind of modified it a little bit. So this is Crowns and Thorns.
Spirit, lead me where my trust is without voice.
Welcome back to Ray of Life Radio. I love the way that that song has been mixed by KB. That's Crowns and Thorns from Tomorrow We Live, his album. That takes contemporary Christian music to an entirely different community and to an entirely different level when you start being able to reach almost everyone with the Word of God. It's amazing that God has given us the ability to communicate in that way. And I love to be able to listen to different genres of Christian music and be able to pick out the doctrine that is within. Today we are talking about grief and what it looks like to those around us, and we're probably on our last segment for the day. We're going to start talking about something called the mud hole. Now, there are 3 ways that you can react to someone in grief. So if you're on the outside, you can take one of 3 stances. You can have sympathy for them. Sympathy is where we see the plight they're going through from a distance. We feel sorry for them, but we just don't have the urge to jump in and help. That's kind of like watching somebody as they drown and sit there and go, oh, they're drowning, and not do anything to help them. That's what we call sympathy. Grievers don't need people to just stand at a distance and feel sorry for them, because in many instances they are already fighting through feeling sorry for themselves. So it's vitally important we don't go the way of just the sympathetic bystander. The other way we can respond to them is by over-identifying with them. This is where we jump right into their grief and we so emotionally connect with them that it starts bringing back emotions from when we have gone through grief. We become so tied up in their grief, we lose our connection to reality. And when you're talking about an emotional mud hole, you wind up, as an over-identifier, simply getting stuck in the bottom of the hole with them. You've got your sympathetic person standing on the shore then, or on the rim of the hole, going, oh, now they're both in the hole, and walking away. And then you, as the over-identifier, are standing in the hole with the griever, both of you lost and no way to help yourself out of that. The last way we can react to somebody that is going through grief is called empathy. Empathy is where we are able to connect with what the person is going through, and we relate it to what we've gone through before. However, we remain rooted or grounded to something to keep us from getting sucked into the extent of over-identification. And in many instances, as a Christian, our root, our connection to reality is our relationship with Christ. We know that Christ wants us to help others, so we provide help out of our love, and Christ works through us to try to help that person that we're helping to get out of that hole. You see, when we over-identify and get stuck in the hole, we tend to lose all connection to Christ. We wind up with no way out. So by maintaining our groundedness, by maintaining our connection to that root in Christ, we're able to have the strength that only Christ can give us to be able to help someone through a tough time like grief. It's important that we do that. As we go through this show, we do occasionally talk about, our strength and that we draw from our faith. And it is vitally important that everyone that's going through grief realize that you don't have the strength to go through grief on your own. It's just not possible. I believe that God gives us grief in pieces, because if we were to take the entire amount on at once, it would allow us to break. And God doesn't want that for us. I actually read an interesting post this week where the person that was posting said that they believe that grief is a side effect of the original fall. That as someone around us dies, the body realizes that this is not the way it was intended. The fall in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, their fall introduced death to humanity. And he believes that because of that, we mourn the fact that it should not be this way. And that's an interesting way to look at it. And I'm going to do some more research and see if I can connect with that, because, that does make a little bit of sense. We have really struggled through a lot in our lives because of the fall. And why not one additional thing coming out of that has been universal for time on end to do that now. But one last thing I want to leave you with today is understanding that grief is cumulative. I like to use the analogy of an onion. Onions are in layers. You peel back one layer, you have to peel back another layer, and you eventually get to the center. Well, that's the way grief is. We start out as that center of the onion, and each time we have a loss, and I must remind everyone that loss or grief is not just caused by death. It's job loss, it's relationship changes, it's any major change in your life can trigger a grief reaction. But each grief reaction layers upon the other one. So if you do not process through each of those layers, you'll just eventually wind up with one large onion where grief after grief after grief has layered up. And you'll notice that as each layer is added, it becomes bigger. It becomes more complicated to then sort through each one and simply be able to process through. So as we learn new tools for our toolbox from what we're talking about here on Ray of Life Radio, it's important to remember that as we experience that loss, we are able to simply process through, and I don't mean simply flippantly, we're able to process through that loss. At one point in our lives, we've lost a lot of things. Our family has. We went through a lot of tough times. We lost things financially, we lost things materially, and then we lost family members. And during that time, it was at the point where we were at our breaking point. But because of God, because of the strength we were able to draw from our local church and the people within it, we were actually able to process through that grief to our new normal. And now we're in the process of rebuilding and experiencing a life that is so much richer and so much fuller in Christ himself. You're listening to Ray of Life Radio today, WGFS 1430 AM in Covington, Georgia. We have come to the end of our show for the day. I'm going to play one last song before we get out of here and turn things back over to the radio station. But again, join us next week here from noon to 1 every Friday. We're going to have conversation. I'll probably have a special guest in the studio next week to join in the conversation as well. Ray of Life Radio can be reached on email, rayofliferadio@gmail.com, Facebook, facebook.com/Ray of Life Radio, and Twitter @Ray of Life Radio. Again, thank you for listening today. This last song I'm going to leave you with is Hello, My Name Is by Matthew West from his album Into the Light.
Whoa!